Good afternoon, everyone. Habari? All right. This is a case where post-pandemic, when we have events, we have more remote audience than we have in-person audience, but that's okay. That's the beauty of having hybrid events. I'd like to welcome you to today's event. Let me start this way. The Woman King follows the remarkable story of the Agogie, an all-female unit of warriors who protected the African kingdom of Dahomey in the 1800s. The story, inspired by true events, follows the emotional journey of General Naninska, played by the great Viola Davis. That's the Woman King story. As she inspires the king, played by the great John Boyega, to take on the enemies determined to violate their honor and destroy their way of life. General Naninska, who is the Woman King, sets out to prove some things are worth fighting for. It's a proud moment, really, in African and feminist studies, when within 1 month, 2 Hollywood movies, The Woman King and Wakanda Forever, the Black Panther sequel, chronicle the heroic lives of African women in history and global affairs. It is appropriate then that our university-wide Africa Scholars Forum at McCormack's 4th annual Winnie Mandela Speaker and Kwanzaa celebration equally celebrates the theme of the Woman King. The great Winnie Mandela, often named the mother of the nation in South Africa, was a woman king, for those of you who knew her. Winnie Mandela was a South African anti-apartheid activist and politician, and the second wife of the great Nelson Mandela. Winnie served as a member of parliament from 1994 to 2003, and from 2009 until her death, and was a deputy minister of arts and culture from 1994 to 1996, and a member of the African National Congress, ANC political party. She served on the ANC's National Executive Committee and headed its Women's League. So we are also pleased to end this year at McCormack and at UMass Boston at the Africa Scholars Forum by celebrating the Kwanzaa today. Kwanzaa itself is an annual celebration of African and American culture from December 26th to January 1st, culminating in a communal feast called Karamu, usually on the 6th day. The celebration was created in 1966 by activist and a scholar, Malana Karenga, who is still a professor at the University of California State Systems currently. And he based this, what is now, this big celebration and holiday on African harvest festival traditions from various parts of West and Southeast Africa. So I'd really like to welcome all of you and especially thank our keynote facilitators of today's twin celebrations, Crystal Gayle O'Neill, who will present on the Women King, and Professor Jemadari Kamara, who will moderate our Kwanzaa celebrations today. Welcome all, have a great celebration, and let me hand this over back to our moderator, Balkisa, who will hand it over to I think it's Abby, who is going to be introducing our keynote speaker, Crystal Gayle O'Neill. All right, so is it Abby or is it Balkisa? Abby, please.
You can give to co-host. Okay. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for that rousing introduction, Prof. Kiki. It's very important what we are here to do today. And several women have made their mark on this campus as well, and are making their mark across the world. And one of them is Crystal Gayle O'Neill. Crystal is an adjunct lecturer for global gender politics at Babson College here in Massachusetts, and an Adam Smith and Dan Levaux Fellow in Political Economy at the McCartis Center at George Mason University, and a fellow at the University of California Center for Free Speech and Engagement. She's also an associate lecturer and a PhD candidate in global governance in human security here at UMass. Crystal?
Why, hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Every time I hear my bio read, I'm like, who is that person? Because it sounds surreal that I have been doing all those things. And true to form for myself, right now, I'm actually coming to you live and direct from my fellowship at George Mason in Virginia for Adam Smith the weekend. So I am double booked, but hopefully everyone will bear with me as we go through this. Welcome. Thank you, Dina Dozie, for your invitation to speak. It reminds me that I need to be mindful of running my mouth about my love of movies and also Black feminist theory, because sometimes you might be asked to do a keynote speech about the very things that you're running your mouth about. Thank you also to my co-presenter, Professor Kamara, and he will bring the theoretical piece to this talk, and I will give you what I always call the fun portion of it. To my McCormack family, GJHS and conflict resolution, I want to say hello. And I see Muna and Benjamin and Alan out there, and just to say thank you for coming, and to all the folks who are on from UMass Boston and beyond, thank you for joining us. So I'm gonna share with you my screen, and to really preface this keynote speech, it says screening of the movie, but let me clarify, it's actually going to be selected scenes. HAGSA, which is the organization, the African Students and Graduate Students Association, is going to do a full screening of the movie. So look out for that, and make sure if this presentation gives you, like, sparks something and you want to see that the full movie, HAGSA is going to screen it, so look out for that, and talk with Balkisa about the dates for that. So this presentation is not a full screening, it's actually selected scenes that are in line, I perceive, with the Kwanzaa themes. So this is the run of show, right? I'm going to go through all of this, then I will transition off to go to my session, and then Professor Kamara will jump in. You will have Karamu. I'm so jealous because I know some good food has been purchased that I won't be able to partake in, and I'm a little jealous. And then we will close it out with the dinner celebration. If somebody can FedEx me some food to Virginia, or if someone wants to drive down overnight, I would totally appreciate that. So whenever I start any presentation, I often start with land acknowledgement. I know land acknowledgements are controversial, and folks might have a lot to say about it. However, it is my own personal view that as we think about the indigenous peoples across North America and South America, or the globe, and especially in the context of this speech, where we're talking about decolonization, both pre and post, that we actually should acknowledge the land upon which we are present. And I say this and I bring this because I'm someone who, when I traversed the US for the first time, I went to school on Seminole land, so it was always salient to me, and I've continued to support the indigenous populations, both with my pocket and my time and volunteering. And I feel like we should always reflect on the unceded lands, especially in Boston, of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts Nation, upon whose land our university sits. All right, so before we go, I wanted again, say big up to yourself. Hello to everybody. Hello to everybody who is on. I want to preface this presentation and to say again, like Professor Edozie, Dean Edozie spoke to you about why we're here, but I want to bring that back to the forefront to say we're here and we're gathered because we're having this celebration regarding Winnie Mandela and Kwanzaa, right? This is the 4th annual. Professor Edozie did not put this in there, but the series was renamed last year for Winnie Mandela, right? And this year's theme is African Women in Contemporary Hollywood, right? And I'll be reflecting on the Woman King. I also wanted to do the Black Panther, but we just gonna roll with the one that we got. And my presentation is going to be interwoven with my own views and thoughts about how the principles of Kwanzaa intertwine in the film. And as I said, Professor Kamara is going to give you like the intellectual, theoretical side of it. So strap in for that when he comes up. All right, some key notable people that Professor Edozie spoke about before that I really want to bring into the room and to situate them are the 2 people while we're here. Winnie Mandela and Professor Malanga Karenga, who created Kwanzaa, and the person who this seminar, this series is named after. The next person I want to bring into this room is Gina Prince Baithwood, who is the director of The Woman King. She's also, as you can see on the screen, the director of many, many films that I have watched, and many, many films that I love and continue to like follow her work and see her as one of those women of color who continually tries to invoke herself into her work and brings the audience along in such a fun way. So those 3 people are very significant to this day and to this talk, and I just wanted to bring them into the room. So in situating my reflections, I want to, like I always start my classes by telling my students what this class or what this talk is about and what it's not about. Right. So I'm going to start with what this talk is sort of like going to hold what I call lightly, not tightly. Right. And lightly, not tightly, because they're in the background and in the foreground, and we're just going to hold them as constant. Right. And then pivot to what the talk is actually going to be about. So one of the things that I'd like us to hold lightly, not tightly, is I am not an Africanist. Right? I am, as I've been described by folks, I am an African descent, Afro-diasporic young lady from the Caribbean, right? Who loves Black feminist thought, who loves everything Black women, and will run our mouth about any of those things. So I'm not an Africanist. I'm not a historian. I am just a lover of all things comic book, all things Marvel. I dabble in DC, and I love films, especially films that are promoted as empowering to Black women in particular. I also want us to hold that this movie is a work of fiction, right? With some historical sprinkling in there, because there has been a huge debate, and I will get to the critiques of it towards the end about this particular film and what it represents. So in that sense, I want us to remember, right, that this film is a product of the imagined Hollywood industry, right? And of in particularly the director and how she put this together. So remember, keep that in mind, that it is imagined for Hollywood and for that particular genre. I would like us to hold lightly, not tightly, right, that Dahomey, or the Kingdom of Dahomey, was a key player in the African slave trade. A lot of the critics that came out of this from this movie, or came in response to this movie, was not to valorize the slave trade and to actually hold the Kingdom of Dahomey to its role in the slave trade. So we're gonna like hold that lightly and to say, yes, we know it was a key player, and still explore the film. The last thing that I want us to hold lightly, not tightly, is that the Agoje, their battles consisted mainly within the continent of Africa, West Africa, and against various tribes and kingdoms that were surrounded them. Historians may know, like I said, I'm not a historian, that the Agoje did indeed, or in fact, what I say, engaged in conflict with various colonial powers, but didn't fare off so well, right? So that again is another critique of the film around like what exactly is being portrayed. So what this talk will actually focus on is on the portrayal, as the theme says, of African women, specifically African and diasporic women in contemporary film, right? The messaging that comes out of that, reception, both like positive and negative, critiques of the film, and sort of like what was levied at it. And I'm gonna say this is my alignment with the Kwanzaa principles as I interpret the show. And then to finish it with culminating in, does it all matter? Like, what's the point of having reflections about such a film like The Woman King, or for that matter, Wakanda Forever, in the context of Black imaginary? So as I continue on, I found this interesting. And I'm not sure if other people might find it interesting, but I wanted to put some facts out there because academics, and you got to do what you have to do. So the Agoje, or the Dahomey Amazons, as they were called by Western Europeans, did in fact exist. They were an all-female military regiment, as Dina Dozie said before, and they existed and were called either the Agoje, the Mino, or mothers. And as you heard before, the namesake of this program, Winnie Mandela, was also called Mother of the Nation. So there is some linkage between mothers in this sense. They existed for much of the Kingdom of Dahomey's existence between the 1600 to 1904. And this all-military regiment became necessary because of the high volumes of casualties their male counterparts suffered in sort of like raids, either slave raids or other types of raids with other West African states. The Agoje, or the women warriors, fought in slave raids along their male counterparts and along the male fighters. And I think that is very significant when we think about violence and women in war, that in this period, they fought alongside male warriors. And a very interesting fact for people who are Black Panther fans, either of the movies or of the comic book, that the Agoje were the inspiration for the Black Panthers Durham LJ, and actually for the Black Panther in its entirety. You didn't know, now you know. So one of the places where I want us to start as we venture into sort of like the screening portion of this movie and to unpack is, I'm starting with the trailer, the official trailer of The Woman King, because I mean, I think this is probably one of the most well put together, tasteful trailers. And we're going to go through it and watch it and then talk about why I find it to be so interesting. I feel like once I saw that trailer some months ago when it was being advertised and when it was released, I knew I was committed to watching this film, right? Because never before had I seen a full cast of beautiful melanated Black women, right? Just on my screen doing like the like the unimaginable, right? And it started me like, so like like I said, I'm a fan of the Black Panther, so I'd already started doing like digging deeper into the legend of the Panther King and stuff like that. And in talking with my friend Balkisa, even discovered that there was an older film about the Agojé some time ago, right? That didn't come much into the mainstream of Hollywood, but this has been a story that has been told, right, before, and continues to be told. And I thought like this probably was the best time, right, if we're thinking about in the context of culture and in the context of sort of like where America and the world is going right now, was the best time for it to come out, right, on the heels of Black Panther, the first Black Panther, and just before Wakanda Forever. The positioning of this film, right, made it, I would say, successful in folks really grappling with lots of the issues that came up and came through the threads of this. One of the interesting things is, and I'm not sure if people know, that Lupita Nyong'o was actually cast as one of the main actresses. She was supposed to play Nawi, which was eventually played by Tuso Mbedu in the first casting. And as part of her own research as a thespian and as like, you know, a Yale graduated MFA, she went and she did her own research, right? She went and did a docuseries about the Agojé. And this particular segment is from the entire docuseries that she has done, and you can find it on YouTube, the whole thing, and we'll come back to sort of like a piece of it at the end. So I wanted you to like hear from Lupita when she went to do her own investigation. If you've been following up on the Woman King, or been on the Twitter, in the Twitterverse, or on Black Twitter, you would have heard an entire debate about Lupita and her exit from the project after she did this documentary. Not much is said about why she exited, except she said this wasn't the film for me, right? But has offered nothing else. But there has been much speculation about her feeling like it wasn't the film for her because the film did not address its role in the slave trade. And if you're interested, like I said, you can actually watch the full episode. Towards the end of this, of her docuseries, she actually confronts the person who is her translator that you saw before, to ask that specific woman about the role of the Agojé and how she can still how she can reconcile the role that these women played in the slave trade. And there is a deep conversation that they have that I encourage folks to explore as well. So one of the things that I wanted to do with this talk is to, as I said, really bring in what I believe are the tenets or the principles of Kwanzaa that I believe this film actually brings out for me. Some of them I've grouped together in the interest of time. So we'll go through select scenes and talk more about like why I think so. So for this one, I think this particular scene embodies Umoja, which is unity, and Ujima, which is collective work and responsibility. So Umoja is the importance of unity in all areas: family, community, nation, and race. And sorry, the other principle, Ujima, which is collective responsibility, is about collective responsibilities for both the achievements and setbacks of the community, and to employ problem-solving skills to move the community forward. And I think like these two really embody this particular scene. And so this is actually courtesy of Voodoo that we have purchased the film from, and it's actually the first 9 minutes of the film. So this is the most you'll see of the film in the context of it, and I was very purposeful in selecting this film, and we'll talk about that more. So that whole 9 minutes gave me life. I don't know if you had seen it before or this is your first time seeing it. I felt like from the beginning till the end of that scene was just powerful. It spoke to so many different types of feelings I was having, and also in the sense, like I said, drilling down to the principles of Kwanzaa that I highlighted, which was unity and collective responsibility. In this particular portion of it, right, the importance of community, right, family, the nation or the state or the kingdom of Dahomey, and even though it's not really said, race is very present in this scene. The amount of Black and brown people, well, Black people in this scene from start to finish, right? Showing multiple complex sides of this nation, something that has, I believe, not been seen in film in such a long time. And also like the utter skill and beauty of these women, right? Who can embody both strength, right, and also beauty seamlessly. And I love this scene, and and if I had not at all seen the film and I had seen this 9 minutes, I would want to like see so much more, because it really shows that the film to me is really talking about, as she said, an enemy is coming, right? And we need to do something about it. We need to problem solve. We need to talk about it. And also, even though the pundits have said like the film does not address sort of like the Dahomey Kingdom's role in the slave trade, it does really mention that, yes, that they were engaged in it, to the level of, should they have been like, yes, and we're going to say that we definitely traded in slaves and we're going to like make that the central focus. I don't think that was the point of the film, right? The point of the film was, as the director was looking at it, at a film about empowerment, not just for women, but for the Black community in general, as we think about collectively what we should do, and also when it comes to unity in unifying community, family, and race. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over Imani, which is faith. Not because I want to, but because I don't want to eat into Professor Kamara's time. A particular piece here that I think is important as we speak about the film. Kujichagulia, and if you had a hard time pronouncing that word, trust me, I had to like pronounce it and practice saying it multiple times, is the tenet or the principle that deals with self-determination, right? The building of our own identity as persons, as communities, both from a historical standpoint and presently, right? And I think like one of the things that Gina tried to embody in this film is to really show the complexities of this story, and also situating it even loosely historically in a context, and also how Black women in the context of Hollywood and film are oftentimes viewed. As you heard before from the piece, it was said that the Agoje were seen by the Europeans as sexual exotic warriors, right? Always exotifying and sexualizing Black women, even when they are in sort of like this warrior stance, still finding sort of like these sexual innuendos to place at Black women's feet. So in this scene right here, I think I'm bringing in the director in here, where she talks about the training that the women went through for Women King. All the women did their own stunts. They had to train for months on end vigorously to get to the level that they are in the movie, right? And I feel like that in itself is exceptional. If you don't watch the film because of all the controversy, watch it, because these women actually put their bodies to the test to become swords people, to become, to do all the fights, to like learn martial arts so that they could deliver this on screen. So having already had researched this film and actually watched the actual trainings that they went through, because they had some behind the scenes, I was in awe of everything that these amazing actresses did to bring this film to life. In one of the behind the scenes videos, Viola Davis is talking to Tuso, and she says, I am 55 years old and I had to go and I had to do the training. And she was basically saying, y'all are young, right? So this might have come easy to you all, but I'm 55, right? And having and her really putting that, to the younger women to say, it was rigorous and we had to go through it, and putting even that piece in there about age, right? Because as we talk about ageism and other types of isms, like that is a real real thing that a lot of older, especially women, think about their worth, about their value. And here Viola is saying like, yeah, I'm 55, right? And I'm holding my own against like young women training vigorously. What I also loved about what Gina was saying was she also joined in the training with the women and was there early in the mornings going through the training. And it just speaks to the level of commitment that not only the director had, but also the women had. John Boyega, who plays King Gizu, in an interview that he did on the Breakfast Club, was like he loved being in this film because the men basically didn't do much, and as the king, he didn't do much. He just like was traipsing around in like all the roles, really need to do much, and he was like, it is so good. Sorry, it is so good. Oops. It was so good that he was able to just go and not do much of the trainings or anything, and that the women were actually the ones who were doing things for a change. And he thought, wow, that was like probably like the best thing since sliced bread. So these women really put in some serious training in this film and brought it on screen and showed, I guess, like what is oftentimes levied at Black women: strength and character and resilience. And for all the critics that were levied at it, I got that messaging out regarding empowering women, because we oftentimes don't get that on screen. So Nia is purpose. Like I said, gonna go past it and really go towards sort of like the last portion of it right here, the last bit of screening that I have, and that is the principle of Kumba and Ujama, which is creativity and corporate economics. So that whole scene, when I think about creativity and this piece about Ujamaa, which is collective economics, I think about how these women had to use their smarts and their wills. In the movie before, the character that you saw, he is from the Oyo tribe, and the Dahomey have to pay tribute via monies or goods or so on and so forth, slaves, and they would bring these tributes from time to time. And the king, acting on the advice of Naniska, said, okay, we're going to probably shift away from slave labor to palm oil. There's some truth in that, and start to think about other ways. And here, right, they employed lots of creativity to say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're diversifying. We're trying to find other ways of doing, and also to think about how to creatively solve our own issues. So I feel like this whole movie, right, if you haven't seen it yet, really embodies a lot of the Kwanzaa principles. In my estimation, it might not be everybody's estimation, but in certainly mine. So some of the critiques, I have them on the screen. You can do this right now. You can go to Twitter and do hashtag boycott Women King. There was a call for a boycotting of the Women King, but the film still has made $94.2 million to date. So I'm not sure how effective that was, maybe. Lupita's exit from the film after the docuseries really fueled a lot of this boycott around sort of like reconciling the Dahomey Kingdom and the Agoge's role in the slave trade. Has that yet been rectified or reconciled? Not to how as much as people have felt, right? A lot of the critiques that were also levied specifically were on Black women's bodies, right? Here were the racialized tropes that came back again, right? Women can't be kings. So if women are kings, our men's going to be queens now. These women in Jamaica would say like, oh, them tough, them look masculine, right? All of those familiar tropes started to be levied at this film. And it got me thinking about, why is it that whenever a film that is supposed to empower Black women and supposed to empower or to show Black women in any light is often met with racialized tropes, right? And they diminish the role of African women as leaders, both pre-colonization and post-colonization, and essentially continue this whole savage nation or savage people. There was also a reinvigorating of debates about slavery, right, already existing in Africa, and that the reason why the slave trade was so prominent was because it was already going in Africa, and then the Europeans just went down there and did what was already being done. We all know the narratives around that, and they have been debated many times and debunked, but that actually, like, this whole movie brought that up again. And again, to also iterate that this is not obviously an accurate telling of the story, right? There was both a valorization and a criminalization of the Agoge, but we also have to recognize that this is and was a piece of Hollywood fan fiction that should be taken as the artistry that it was, right? Very lightly, not tightly. So does it all matter? To me, yes, it does, right? Comic-Con, in the wake of Black Panther and the Woman King, has just resurged the Black nerd. I am one of those people. I cosplay. If you can spot me in this picture, and from someone who has gone to Comic-Con many times, the characters that were there for Black people were oftentimes white characters, right? And I, for one, felt really terrible to be in any white character. The closest I would go to is Wonder Woman, not the Linda Carter version, the actual Amazons, because they were closely linked. But as soon as Black Panther dropped, I was able to finally fully embody my nerd and my cosplay role. And going forward, I can see many, many more people, and girls specifically, taking part in cosplay and in sort of like nerd culture, because now there are more characters that embody us. So that is all that I have for you in essence of time. And hopefully the film sparked some some conversation for you. The showing sparked some conversations for you. And as you take it further with Professor Kamara, I hope that you will have some invigorating conversations about, what are some of the tenets of Kwanzaa that might fit not only with the film and its viewing, but also in your own life and in your own communities. So there are some of my sources. And I just want to say thank you all very much for listening to me ramble about my love of film.
Okay. Thank you so much, Crystal, for a very insightful presentation. People in the audience are asking if you have 5 minutes for Q&A, but it's fine if you don't.
I probably have 2 minutes because my next session starts at 5. And I don't know if you know about the Mercatus Center, but they're a stickler for time.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much again. Thank you. Yeah. We just have a few minutes to break.
I will say though, Balkisa, if folks have questions for me, they can email me. You have my email address. Just let them drop me some questions and I'll be more than willing to respond.
Yes,
thank you to everybody online.
Yeah.
Oh, I see you. And I see you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Excellent job.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to briefly introduce Professor Kamara. Professor Jemandari Kamara is the chair and associate professor of Africana Studies in the College of Liberal Arts. He is the director of the Center for African, Caribbean, and Community Development. In the 1990s, Professor Kamara helped found and continues to coordinate the annual Martin Luther and Amilcar Cabral commemorative program. Among Kamara's numerous publications includes States of the Race, Creating Our 21st Century, co-edited and contributor 2004, which won the Chashi McIntyre Award and was named the African Heritage Study Association's Outstanding Book of the Year. He was also the editor of Socially Responsible Investments and Economic Developments, 1987. His expertise includes community development and public policy, Black social movements, African American urban politics, and African American intellectual thought. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium Professor Kamara. Thank you.
An extremely stimulating presentation. I thank you, Dean, for placing our Kwanzaa celebration today in this context. It was important. Also, the way in which she linked the discussion and dynamics of the film to the values that we'll be able to talk about for a few minutes. I know we are all being tempted here, and so we won't be that long in our conversation, but there's some very important issues that were raised. And as she noted in the beginning of our celebration, we're having a Karamu and the entire celebration linked together, but we always begin with libation. She referenced this with regard to the land on which we stand. But libations are a way of us communing with our community and our ancestors. And I would like to ask one of our distinguished former faculty members who's with us today, Dr. Terry Nelson, if you would come forward, please, and share libation.
Thank you. And in honor of our ancestors, may I have permission to speak? Yes, the elder to give me permission to speak, and I might be the elder, but yes, I have permission to speak. So family, we give praise and appreciation to the Creator. And we call upon our ancestors and we pour this libation, this water as a connection with our ancestors. So if we could begin by calling our blood ancestors, and then we'll move to call upon our heroes and sheroes who have guided us through up to this day and moment, this Ma'afa. So let's begin by calling upon our blood ancestors. I'll begin, and I pouring, I don't have any views. Just this. Okay.
Edward Swan.
Dolores, Arlino, Charles, Kingston. Monica, Ashe, and we say Ashe after the phone. So lift your voices to your blood ancestors, your mother, father, grandfather. Ashe, Ashe,
Lois Parrish.
Ashe,
Malcolm Bullock.
Ashe. Ashe, Ashe. Charles and Josephine, Ashe. And let us call upon our heroes and sheroes who have guided us through this this great tragedy that has come upon us as African people. Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Marcus Garvey. Sheikh Anta Diop. Winnie Mandela. Sheikh. Sheikh. Frederick Douglass. Harriet Tubman. Ashe.
Saronia.
Ashe. And we call upon those unnamed heroes and heroes. And we say Ashe. We call upon those who didn't make it through the middle passage. Ashe. And for those who made it through the middle passage. Ashe. And we ask their continued blessings and guidance as we continue this journey in the restoration of African greatness. And simultaneously, the connection within humanity as we are one human family who's had its origins in Africa. African civilization. Ashe. Thank you.
Our celebration of Kwanzaa is a celebration of the first fruits of Kwanzaa means first. It is an African American celebration. For whom is this the first time we've gathered? Speaking of Kwanzaa celebration. Well, welcome to the gathering of the family. As was explained earlier, as an African-American celebration modeled on the harvest festivals, traditional festivals in Africa, Maulana Karenga used a series of symbols and values. Everything you see on the Kwanzaa table is representative of a set of values at the core, represented in the Mishu Misa Sabu, which is set in the Kanara, which is on the Mkeka, the foundation, on which all of these principles rest. It is a celebration that we normally would carry on in our community from the 26th of December through the 1st of January. It is not a religious celebration. It is a cultural celebration. It is a celebration of values. No matter what your religion might be, yes, it is spiritual because it rests on a set of values. But your religious faith all culminates in the last day of the celebration, which is Imani, which is faith. Faith that has brought us through the hope that we have for this new year, the coming year. And the things on our table are all representative of that. The kikombe, cha umoja, the unity cup, which we use as the base for our libations. We have the mazao, which represents the fruits of our harvest, physically, the physical fruits and vegetables that are here on the table. Frequently, we would also have ears of corn. And the ears of corn, if you do this, for example, in your own home, and you might have 2 children, you would have 3 ears of corn, because those represent our fertility, our ability to produce going forward. Because as we speak of community, it is not only that of our ancestors, or those of us gathered here or on the Zoom, but it is also our community not yet born, of which their seed will come from us. Each of these represents some element of our life and spirit. Also, we have the zawadi, the gifts, which are normally shared out of our own creativity, our ideas, not so much on materialism, but of our spirit with each other on the last day. The zawadi, the gifts. The film, and I think we want to have discussion both about the values and link that to the film as well as our own experiences. I didn't expect to actually have commentary in this way on it, but the film is very special to me personally and us as a community. The things of which she spoke in this film of the Dahomey kingdom, is very special to UMass Boston, in that now it must be at least a decade. The king of Benin came to us. And it was here that he made a public acknowledgement of the role that the traditional leadership of the kingdom of Dahomey played in the Ma'afa, which produced us here. And he offered prayers to the ancestors and an acknowledgement of the role that his ancestors had played in this process. And he asked for forgiveness. And he asked that we contribute by acknowledging and accepting his request for forgiveness, that we contribute then to the development of people of African descent here and on the continent. He sat in the capital of the Republic of Benin, which is where this shot, which was the base of the empire of Dahomey. Uniquely separated from the nation of Oyo. And where she spoke about this in the film, it's important to understand that this division of the nation and the state are very important in understanding the complexity of this story as it actually got played out in our story, not his story. Because Oyo will come under the domination in this period of another colonial ruler than that which will actually take control of Dahomey or Port Novo, where the king of the empire was based, because it is his brother, Gezo, who will go to Porto Novo and set up the capital of that empire, which will then become the empire of Benin, or this country of Benin, which is separate from the traditional empire, which is actually based in what we now call the country of Nigeria. And Oyo represented that which becomes dominated by the English. So this colonial intervention into the lives of the traditional nations in Africa has an enormous impact. For me personally, this story and this country has another important role, because it was there that my daughter was born. So as we talk about the role of women kings, the role of women is exceedingly important. And in the film, you saw that they talked about the two panthers that were seated seemingly in opposition, but become unified in the production of the empire. In the cloth that they wore, they told the entire story of the kingdom of Dahomey through the symbol that they have, whether it was the iron or the sword or the lion or the leopard or the other animal figure representations. Each tells the story of the entire empire. And just as you saw the narrator with Lupito, when she went to the king, so too does their cloth tell the story, and it is narrated orally because we come from the oral tradition. I don't want to go on. I want us to share. This is an occasion for sharing that certainly smelled awfully good in the back too, and we're going to share, break bread together. But I want to have your comments too. The impact that both, I thought the very insightful commentary, as well as the film, for those of you who've seen it, has had on you. I did want to, before I forget, however, I want to make two quick announcements and then engage in this conversation and be mindful of our time. But one is that the Africana Studies Department is making available to you tickets free for Wakanda Forever. All right. And so those of you who are interested, You were the first to know. They're gonna go fast. You should come to the Africana Studies Department on Monday. See Bell, our administrative assistant. Can't come, call. Get your name on the list. The showing will be next Saturday, the 16th of December. And right up here at South Bay Theater, which is where it's showing. Pick up your ticket from her during the week. So please, we want to be sure that they're utilized well. So those will be free for you. Everyone's can access a ticket.
Tell them where the Africana Studies Department is.
No, I'm not gonna tell them. See, they need to know that by now. If they want a ticket, they go find it. No, we're on the 4th floor of Wheatley Hall. I'm sorry, 4th floor Wheatley Hall. When you come off the elevator, turn left, go through the double doors and we're right there. With welcoming arms, you need to come just to get the ticket though. No, come and see us, please. 4th floor Wheatley Hall. Secondly, and that's the showing is the 16th of December. And those of you on the Zoom, please, you're welcome to join us. Additionally, that was the 16th of December. On the 16th of January, we will have the 25th anniversary of the Martin Luther King Jr. Amilcar Cabral commemorative ceremony. It's the 25th year that we have done this, and we will have as featured speakers, Ms. Charlene Hunter Galt, who many of you may know, formerly the anchor person on PBS News, who has a new book out, which is very, very interesting book, and she's done other things, the new news out of Africa and so forth. She will be a featured speaker, along with the president of Cabo Verde, Jose Maria Neves. And so they will be here the 16th of January. Hold the date for us. You'll be hearing more about that. But I'd like to open the floor for your commentary and discussion.
Well, let's give you a round of applause for this. You have questions?
Not a question, but just a comment. I don't think I would be watching the whole movie because for me, so much violence. But I really like the angle of the narrative, because most of the times women are always portrayed as victims of war. And in that movie, we see women as protectors, women as the perpetrators of violence, and it's kind of empowering, but in a twisted way, I get it. That women, like, you see women exercising their agency and taking control of their lives and protection of their community. So I really like that.
Speak to that.
Oh, well, I want to speak to you. I just want to thank, Professor Kamara and Crystal Gale for your dual, really fantastic presentations of these two huge important themes. I wish Crystal Gale was still with us to have some conversation about some of the critiques. So I think she gave a really balanced, interpretation of the movie. But I wanted to speak to the Lupita critique of the movie. And it was quite well known that she turned down the role of the role that Tuso, the South African actor, eventually took the young, Amazon warrior, classic role. But she turned it down because of her 2019 research and documentary on her interpretation of the Hawaiians as being contributors to Napa and to slavery. Now, maybe, the movie, the script at the time in 2019 did not have a complex rendition of, the Hawaiians' role in the slave trade. Maybe that, but in the movie itself, it did. And what I liked about what the filmmaker did, which is not what a lot of us are doing as Africanists, so I am an Africanist. I am a long-standing, scholar and teacher and researcher of African affairs, which includes African history, African politics, African international relations, and African development policies. So the depiction of the transatlantic slave trade, I don't call it the African slave trade, I call it the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was a trade in human beings that was initiated, controlled, and dominated by the Europeans of Africans. Okay, now the complexity of how that global international intervention into Africa destabilized African political kingdoms, African empires, and African smaller, settlerist tribes is so I think impactful that I think this movie maker tried to depict the complexity. What people don't really try to understand is that there was resistance even within the kingdoms to slavery. And this movie depicted that, because you'll see some scenes, several scenes of conversations between the woman king and the king, the Boyoga, John Boyoga, who portrayed that, and she was saying, look, let us move away from this wicked trade in slaves. Let's move away from that, and let's move into trade in palm oil and in commercial products, right? And so it tried to depict the complexity of the ways in which the Europeans came in, divide and rule, and some empires, to protect themselves, said, look, don't trade in our slaves, trade in their slaves. They are our enemy. So the complexity of that history was depicted in this movie. I don't think it was a movie that celebrated slavery. I think it depicted the complexity of slavery. So I wanted to, speak to that. The issue of, women's empowerment and, the violence, we all like the violence in Black Panther, but, Hollywood, sort of does that, and I think the cinematography, was beautiful, but it was battle, right? It was war, and it depicted a real story of African women who were, armies. They were warriors, and they participated in, paramilitaries, of their day, and of course, the movie, as Hollywood does, exaggerated it and sensationalized it, and but it was really a true depiction of the legacies of African feminism. I disagree with Peter, who says there's no remnants of this Agoge, women who are strong. Of course, they're not paramilitaries, but women movements in Africa. This movie tells us that African women have always been strong and agents of their own destiny, and participated in the economies and the politics, of their communities. And that is true today. That is still true today, although it's also complicated. Okay.
I think it's from Isabel.
Professor, why don't we get Professor
Oh, okay.
Yes, I wanted to speak to what both of you have raised, and you know, the prophecy in evil is coming. And seeing the full of precipitation at that white supremacist paradigm that, you know, like early spluttering of snow starting to hit the ground, you know, just already begun with the invasion in Kemet by the Greeks. And, you know, so this is longstanding, this paradigm that has had and continues to have its fullest precipitation on this planet. We now have the threat of all the saber rattling, the nuclear, you know, to unleash nuclear arms. That's not African people. We're still under this white supremacist paradigm that's come full force in its externalization of precipitation. Sister, my queen, I see those women glimpsing into that and developing, calling on every nerve fiber and sinew and bone and flesh and cell in their bodies to develop physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually for that moment, that fight, that battle. Think about where have women been called to be in sustained warfare for so long? But this wasn't, you know, the Persian War, the Iraq War with current day women went in and did a term of 8 years or whatever. We've been at war. And so those women, the holy, the Goji women, think about the calling forth of the tremendous ferocity they had to. And if they didn't do it then and take that stand, because this is a vicious cycle. It's all been a vicious cycle. You had to figure out where you want to stand. They chose to stand and strengthen and fight. And those who were taken in that transatlantic slave trade had a different fight to fight. You know, think about Kizzy. Think about Kunta Kinte's daughter, Kizzy, and the fight that she has to fight now that just looks different. She has to submit to being raped. She has to hold her integrity together. She has to fight the whole family together. So that is a changing landscape of resistance and how you're going to wage the war and the battle. I think these emoji capture the moment of supreme strength. Supreme strength. The moment before, women had to figure out, and together, before they had to figure out what that resistance would look like. But for Kunta Kinte, he tried to hang on as he was home to hold on to his name, try. But in those moments, he had to make a decision in that vicious cycle to live and to say his name is Toby. It just looks different. But the resistance has been across this whole landscape. So,
Thank you so much. Are we okay? We have that one question.
You have
That's
some.
not there. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I agree in terms of some of the critiques of the film. I think, you know, the question of, you know, looking or comparing the indigenous Saba, in particular the principles of Kwanzaa, with some of those, you know, I found, you know, when to challenge some of that. But there's a particular film, I don't know if people have heard the film called Saonia. Anybody? Saonia? Saonia. So it's played by, I forget the Mauritania, the guys from Mauritania did the film, right? And it takes place in the 1800s. It's based on real life of African women who united, you know, the traditionalists, the Muslims, you know, against the Italians, this is the French, who were colonizing it. So, what I liked about it was it's an African film. And so it had a different lens to it. And so the Hollywood lens can sometimes make things a lot more problematic. in particular, you know, when, you know, even the language question and so forth. And I like aspects of the film, and I think, you know, what it did was, you know, in fact, was my daughter told me to go and see it. She didn't ask me to say go and see it, right? It's what, because of our own trauma, that it's good to see images of Black women, you know, not only fighting, but taking control of their lives, their situation, and so forth, in terms of dealing with that. But I think that, you know, some of the problematic pieces is that, you know, the film opens up with Africans fighting Africans, right? And we have to get into that story because, you know, the question that we have to ask is, what was the conflict, you know, between Benin and Oyo and so forth? What caused that? You know, one of the things is that some new research is showing is that Africa was besieged by a lot of climate issues, right? For hundreds and hundreds of years, which created migration that created the kind of competition for different ethnic groups against one another. And then the European involvement really exacerbated those contradictions. And I think that we have to sort of be clear and understand that this is some of the things that's happening to us now around with the climate change, environment change, and what happens to Black communities and you know, more marginalized communities in terms of how they're the ones who will be sacrificed and who will suffer. And so part of the slave trade was also impacted by you know, the climate issues, in which what we're going to do with all these folks, other than going and fighting and bringing to the Europeans and so forth. But I do think that we have to have a very strong critique of the role that white supremacy, as you pointed out, particularly in the form of Hollywood, and how they create images. For example, Lupita, for example, I like the position she took. I wish she would have taken it with De Beers, right? She's running around a model for De Beers now, selling diamonds. And what is her understanding of what happened in South Africa? You know, so I'm saying that we have to have a different conversation and say, like, because we'll look at Hollywood as a way to give us images. Yeah. And we're not going to our own deep history and have the kind of conversation in our community says, no, that's not cool. And so forth. But also our production of the type of media and films that we need to do. Yeah. Right. You know, maybe McCormack might want to do a film aspect or something, you know, when we get a lot of African students coming to be able to say, how do we challenge this a Hollywood projection that they'll give us some images, but also will give us some distortions that is very harmful.
Sounds good. Marquisa, do we have one last question online or?
Is up.
Yeah, we do have to wrap up though, because we were supposed to close by 5 and it's about 5:30.
So we have two online.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make some general comments. I think one of the things besides what you're mentioning, Professor, about the issues, the environmental issues, which, you know, create a lot of other problems, which we don't often talk about, but in historical context, there was environmental challenges happening, which when the European colonization happened, created a lot of other problems. But I think also I wonder to what extent we're kind of looking through the lens of, you know, in a sense of a post-colonial lens, when we look on Africa and African projections in the media generally, in the sense that we see it in a more context of race, whereas in Africa in the time, it was not a concept of race, it was ethnicity. And so there have been, whether in Europe or throughout South America, there have been this concept battle among ethnic groups, right? Which is something that happens. So to what extent we're looking at it in this kind of post-colonial framework, which is within that context of white supremacy, where race becomes this overarching metric. And then in the sense of women empowerment and Black women and women of African descent, and also the critique around slavery. I'm from Jamaica, and Crystal is also Jamaican. And my family half of my family has origin in the Maroon people of Jamaican origin. So they're Nigerian and Ghanaian, Garifuna, Yoruba, Igbo origin in Jamaica. And, you know, there are different camps, there are different villages which were independent and they gained their independence through fighting against England and fighting two what they call Maroon Wars, winning their independence. And that those groups in Jamaica have autonomy over the lands that they have.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that they faced during those times, like in the 1700s, 1800s, is that they had to return slaves who ran away from plantations into the hills. They had after they won the World War, they had to sign a treaty with England, with the British, to say that they would return slaves. Fast forward today, just a couple months ago, where our government is trying at this point to mine an area that is a Coptic country, which is their domain. There is a whole debacle within Jamaica now where there are people who say, why should they even have land and autonomy when they return slaves back to the British? So they saw them as sellouts.
Yeah.
Whereas, there's another group of people who say, well, that's a part of their survival mechanism. They had to kind of negotiate in this way. And even at least show this forward face while trying to deal with other issues that they have. So that critique, I think, that runs the gamut in in just Black affairs, African affairs, and so on, because we have been through this 500+ years of trauma. We're not going to always get it right. We're not going to always get it, certainly. And there are always these varieties of nuances and complexity. And I think that movie did do justice to some of it. That it did show that, hey, there were voices in the midst, in the King's Council and in the Queen's Army that was saying, hey, we should move away from these things. Let us do palm oil, let us do guns, let us do horses, let us do other things. Where there are others that say, well, for survival, if we don't, we have to get rid of these people. So I think it kind of shows that kind of amount of shame.
And many more, fantastic, Chris, especially in giving us the sort of global, context of African history, and that's why I call it the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, let's understand what it really was. It's not the African slave trade. It was slaves, Africans, but that's not our slave trade, right? So I think though, next month in Black History Month, we need to be looking at Wakanda Forever, right? Continue this conversation, because that takes it, up from history to the global Black imaginary, right? As Crystal was trying to say, and it speaks to some of the questions that you're raising, Chris. But also, the whole question of, slavery being, a human tragedy, right? The word slave is actually Slav, and it was given the name Slav because the Portuguese and Spanish, who originated national slavery, which is taking slaves from one part of the world and bringing it to another part of the world to conduct agriculture and the slave agriculture, were the Spanish and the Portuguese taking the Slav communities, the Slav in Eastern Europe as we know it today. That's why we have the name slave. They took that plantation slavery system in southern Spain and Portugal and transposed it to the west coast of Africa, but the Sao Tome and Principe and the Bakongo regions of the Congo that we know it today, transported that system to those areas, and then as they're seafaring, looking for India, accidentally, inventing or establishing or finding the Americas, begin that entire system of plantation slavery and taking the Africans because they were closest, right? And weakest, and it was a complex deceit by going into trade and then, going into slavery, and then going into politicizing these kingdoms, saying, okay, don't come here, we're gonna, do a treaty with you, so that you can take their slaves. And then it got into, let's slave trade for money, right? For some kingdoms, but the resistance. No movie. Where's the movie on the many, resistance to slavery by Africans? We need to tell our own story. I agree with Professor Van der Veer. Those movies, Hollywood needs to get on these kinds of movies as well. All right, who's up there? That's Roman Oladibolu, who is a filmmaker in the Boston area. So Roman, go ahead and have the last word, then we have to stop.
Oh, we have Isabel too.
Okay.
Yeah, we have Isabel.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, okay, good. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I enjoy the presentations very much. It's a film that I've been following for some time since it came out. I've been a little bit in the middle of it. Given that being someone that I'm currently working on trying to make sure that history, there's some history going on currently right now in Nigeria, especially, that I'm hoping that they're not lost even before they happen. Specifically about Oyo, that's mentioned in the film. I was surprised. It was my brother that called me from Nigeria and asked me, have you seen the woman king? And he was disappointed that Oyo was depicted the way it was. First, they're wearing turban. Oyo, I'm from Oyo, we don't wear turbans. And so that was a first thing. And then when it came to the issue of the slavery, and it didn't ring. I've been asking the question within Oyo before this about the role of Oyo in the slave trade, being a big empire. Without having delved into the history by itself deeply enough, but being an empire, it wouldn't surprise me that they would play some roles in it within Africa before. The Europeans, which somebody mentioned that it was basically ethnic, that we all know it's completely different from what transatlantic slave trade became, and the whole racism part of it. So I want to mention that as a first thing. And also the film, I actually think the film deserves more despite all of this, but I just want to make sure that we talk about these issues so that they can expand the conversations about the film. There are two other films that came out in Nigeria this year that I really wish had been in part of the conversations that I've been hearing, not just here, but across the United States. There is one called Anikulapo, which became a big hit in Nigeria and around the world, which is also about the story of Oyo. It's a well, I wouldn't say really fictional because it's related to the Oduifa, which is the traditional spiritual practices of the Yoruba people. But it tells a story in the context of Oyo, and they also talk about slave trade there. When the Europeans came and what the Oyo kingdom was supposed to do. They were discussing it among their chiefs, people who were against and were fighting. And so I really wish that had also been brought into the conversation. And then there's another one that's called Eleshioba, which is also a story set in Oyo, based on true story, which happened not long ago. The king that that the story happened around is they're celebrating his 78th anniversary this December in Oyo. And it was when he died, and the king's horseman, who's supposed to be the Eleshioba, they call it, that he was supposed to die following the king and for escorting the king on the journey to the afterworld. And the whole, at the time, what happened was the colonial master that was placed in the region of Oyo decided to stop it because he thought it was a barbaric practice and all this condescending Eurocentric attitude to everything African, without understanding, as many people are discussing today, that thing was actually part of the security structure for the Alaafin of Oyo. And by stopping it, they actually stopped something that they didn't understand. It's something that was, now we liken it to, say, the Secret Service that you see around the presidents who are ready to take bullets for the president, but without even having anything culturally integrated as the practice of election Oba. So I think it's important that we keep these stories also in, they're both on Netflix, to keep them as part of this conversation so that and basically to actually turn our eyes towards what's going on in Africa as well, especially in the film industry, because we have a lot of things that are coming out that are speaking to a lot of all these things, but because of the focus on Hollywood so much that we are missing all these opportunities to have enriching contributions to the discussions that we're having. So that's what I want to mention here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramon. Thank you. That's
Pleasure.
very appropriate. Thank you so much.
We have one more person. Isabel, she's
Isabel,
gonna think.
okay?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I seen the whole movie and it was beautiful, and it just reminds us that our traumas will live with us, but we have to go through this history to help us heal, right? So first we need to acknowledge the truth about our history, and then our education system is a racial ideology. And we need to show action and unlearn racism and learn and practice anti-racism. Our school and departments need to support the Africana studies. And that way we can learn our history the right way. And we need to be truthful. And thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Jemadari Kamara, thank you so much. For what a great moderation of our Kwanzaa celebration. Thank you so much. Yes, Wakanda forever. Let's get those tickets. Let's all go. It's a great movie. I'm going to see it again, for free. All right, there's still food. Online audience, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave you now and send your food through FedEx. But thank you for joining us today, and see you next time. Ramon, let's talk. Okay.
Sure.
Let's connect.
All right. Thank you. I'll get in touch. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. There's food, everyone.